everyone, thank you so much for coming back. Today we're going to be making Chilaquiles Verdes. So you're going to need 11 tomatillos, cilantro, queso fresco, tortillas, heavy cream, chicken broth, Chiles Serranos, and garlic as well as lard. Not pictured is half of an onion and I think that's it. Just half of an onion is what I was missing. So we're going to start with the tomatillos, and I've already washed them and unhusked them. I would recommend thoroughly washing them. They're very sticky. I already boiled water. You can choose to do so or just put water in your pot to cover it and then boil it. But I like to make my life easier and, try and get the water boiling first. So in this pot is going to be the tomatillos and the chiles serranos, but only four. So I have a total of five and only four are going in. I'm also going to add about 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt. If you don't want it super spicy, I would recommend de-seeding the chiles serranos. So the one that I left over, I'm just going to quickly slice, and this is more for garnish than being cooked or anything like that. So this shouldn't take you long, just quickly slice it and then separate it for later on. After you've chopped your chile serrano, you're going to work on the tortillas. So we're going to cut them into eighths, and the reason why I did it this time and not later on is because I didn't want the tortillas to get flavor of the onion and the garlic and the cilantro, because I feel like it can get onto it. So I have about 11 tortillas and I just separated it into two piles. I'm not too sure why I went around the table to cut these. Please don't feel like you need to do that. But just make sure they're in little triangles or little tortilla shape. If you want them bigger, just cut them into fourths. It's really all about preference. I know we recently had them after this because this sauce actually makes 2 batches. So we had chilaquiles recently and I just made them bigger. So see, you don't need to go around the table. So after you cut up your tortillas, we're going to move on to the cilantro. So the cilantro, I like to take off of the stem, and I do that because I feel like the stem gives anything like a stringy texture. Even if I chop it up, I don't know, I feel like I just prefer the leaf and not using the full stem. I will use the full stem when I'm boiling it with meat or like making a type of broth, because then I can just take it all out and I taste the cilantro in the broth itself. So separate the prettiest ones because it's also going to be garnish, and then just roughly chop the cilantro. The cilantro is going to be blended in again. So one thing you will need for this recipe is a blender or one of those, blender. That's what you'll need. So after the cilantro, you're going to dice up the garlic. There's multiple contraptions that you can use to take the skin off of garlic. I just like to lightly crush it, unpeel it, and then start chopping it. And this is going into the blender as well, so don't feel like you have to chop it like crazy, but I would recommend chopping it slightly. Personally, every time I put a whole clove of garlic into a food processor or a blender, I feel like it still gets a little chunky. So this helps the blender. Next, we're going to use an onion. So if you remember, I said half of an onion at the beginning. This was a huge onion, and I felt like half of an onion was the same size as a small onion. So if you're like me and end up with a huge onion, just use half. If not, get a small onion and use the whole onion. And I'm just going to use my nifty way of chopping the onion, this is also going into the blender, but like I said, I just want to help the blender out a little bit and not stick a whole onion in it. So we're just going to roughly chop it into cubes, and then we'll be all set with the onion. So like I said, this recipe is going to make 3 cups of the green sauce, and it's great because you can use the green sauce for anything else, but if you're like me, I like to make things in big amounts so that I can save time later on in the week. So we're only going to use 1.5 cups of the sauce once it's completely made. So as you can see, I just roughly chopped it into little cubes. So go ahead and separate your onion. I've probably mentioned this before, but I like to separate all my ingredients before I cook. It just makes everything so much easier, more efficient for me. So here are the tomatillos and the Chiles Serrano. So that boiled for 15 minutes. I noticed that the red tomato, if you boil it, it can take maybe 5 minutes and they're nice and soft and the skin peels off. With the tomatillos, I feel like it definitely does take more time, and 15 minutes I found to be the sweet spot for it. I'm not peeling it, and we're not chopping it up because they're nice and soft. So in the blender is the garlic, the tomatillos, and the chiles. And I was almost about to forget, but go ahead and fill a pot with oil. I use canola oil in this one, but you can use any oil that you prefer to use for frying. So in the back, that's getting heated up while I go ahead and blend the onion, garlic, cilantro, and everything else that we chopped up. Now, the tomatoes were hot, so I put a towel over the blender because I've had numerous occasions where something hot is in the blender and then it splashes out and then I get burned. So just be safe and just cover it with a towel or, whatever you want to protect yourself with. After you've blended a little bit, go ahead and check it and stir it. We're looking for a texture that's smooth but not too smooth. I would definitely see like what kind of texture sauce you prefer. I like it to be more on the smoother side, but I do like a little bit of texture. So blend it to your preference and then set it aside. So in my hot pan, I'm going to put in 1 tablespoon of lard. And I know you guys are probably like, Alex, a lot of your recipes have lard. We don't use lard often. It's only for these type of recipes. It enhances the flavor. And I mean, as long as you're not eating this every day, you're good to go. You're fine. So after I coated the pan with the lard, I'm going to go ahead and put in the green sauce that we just blended. This is going to cook for about 15 minutes until you notice that the texture thickens up a little bit. And to the side you can see where I'm heating up the oil as well. So just stir it and keep an eye on it at this stage because it could have the potential to stick. So after the 15 minutes, add 2 cups of chicken broth. And go ahead and stir it so that it's well integrated together. And I would still keep your heat at about a medium. But now that the chicken broth is in it, you don't have to keep too much of an eye on it. Just, keep stirring it from time to time. And we're just looking for the texture to thicken up again. So now we're going to start with the tortillas. So I'm frying them. It takes about a couple of minutes per side. I feel like each batch took me 3 to 5 minutes depending on how hot the oil is. I'm very careful though because you don't want the oil to burn and you don't want your tortillas to burn either. So just keep an eye on everything. Hot oil is always one of my biggest fears, so just keep an eye on everything. I'm a big fan of multitasking, so it's nice that I can just keep stirring my sauce but maintain my biggest focus on the hot oil. So you'll definitely want to do this in batches. If you put them all in at once, they're going to stick together, so don't do that. Once you finish frying them, go ahead and put them back in the pan where the sauce was. And like I mentioned before, we're only using 1.5 cups of the sauce, so reserve that and then save the rest in a jar and stick it in the fridge. So I like to neatly put it on the bottom, and then we're going to cover the chips with the green sauce, and then we're going to use 1/2 cup of chicken broth. I like to swish it around because there's still some sauce in there. And then you're going to use 1/4 cup of heavy cream. I don't know why I didn't do this, but I do like to mix the chicken broth and the cream together so that when you pour it over, it's more integrated and you're not going to have to mix it with a spatula like I did. I think I was just trying to show you guys what ingredient I'm putting in. So I do apologize, but make your life easier. Don't do this and just mix it all together before putting it in the pan. So be careful when you're stirring these because you don't want the chips to fall apart. But just cook it on a very low heat for about 5 minutes. So while that was just simmering for a bit, that's when I started to make my eggs. I made this more for a brunch on a Saturday. You can make this for dinner. You can use eggs, or if you want one of those rotisserie chickens, just tear it up into strips or shred it and then put it on top. That's a really great quick dinner. Or if you're like me and love breakfast for dinner, you can add some eggs. So my husband likes it when we have fried eggs. So I'm just putting about a tablespoon of olive oil in a nonstick pan. And we're going to fry 2 eggs at a time. It's very quick. I would recommend investing in a good nonstick pan though. This pan has been a lifesaver for me. My eggs haven't been sticking. And when I flip them, which is the scariest thing for me, they flip very easily. So just add some salt and pepper on your eggs or whatever other seasoning you like on them. I would keep it simple though because the sauce has really great flavor. So just fry the eggs up. I love seeing them bubble up and get all sizzly and cooked. So here's the moment of truth. Just flipping them over. Scariest part for me. I don't know about you, but I'm always nervous about destroying the yolk because we love eggs more on the runny side. So once you finish cooking those, just stick them on the pan with the chilaquiles and you're all set. So your dish is made, you're ready to go. We had this on a Saturday, so garnish it with the queso fresco for sure, and then the chilies, and then the cilantro as well. Don't forget that. It's a really great touch because it's a nice fresh texture of the Chiles Serrano. I like that little crunch. But there's my coffee over there because it was in the morning when I was making this, but go ahead and have some beer with this if you're having it on a brunch or for dinner. But let me know how it goes for you. I'd really love to hear how it turns out. So you could tag me on Instagram, you can comment on here or subscribe. But thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys later.